Hi, I'm Cam Krugerberg, and my final project is on whether or not there is a lesbian accent, and I will be discussing the implications of pitch variation and other sound production in gay men versus lesbian women. So, first of all, a little background and just kind of what is the gay accent. Um, So, gay men are often associated with more feminine, high-pitched voice, and sometimes that lisp or a misarticulated S sound. Um, this gay accent sometimes could be attributed to that uptalk or vocal fry, which is often associated with femininity. And then, yeah, once again, that more often that high pitch is associated with femininity, and then that femininity in men is just associated with queerness or um, just a man being perceived as feminine is more likely to be perceived as gay. So yeah, a little bit of like historic background on kind of what led to this gay accent or variety of speaking um, sort of developing. Um, but there have been several language systems that gay men have used to identify each other and navigate their community and the world around them for years and years. So several language variations called argos, such as Polari and Swordspeak, and many others, were created to discreetly communicate with each other when it was too dangerous to be outwardly gay. And so there were a lot of different language varieties where they would take from, multiple languages and kind of mix it together or play around with gender or different like slang and language varieties. And so it was easily recognizable to others within the community, but still be discreet for others who did not understand that particular language variety. So these argos have kind of developed into that differentiation of speaking that we now associate with a gay voice. Um, but also, yeah, so speakers of this gay accent tend to have wider pitch ranges, so they um, might be more inclined to speak with a higher pitch, and then also might pronounce certain vowels differently in the mouth than heterosexual men. So yeah, this is just a little TikTok that I found. This person is a like linguistic nerd, and I think they sum it up pretty well. So I'm gonna go ahead and play this video real quick.
You know how there's a stereotypical gay American male accent? Multiple studies show that listeners can in fact guess the sexual orientation of the speaker at a rate higher than chance, so it is very real, but there are a lot of misconceptions, so let's talk about it. First of all, there is no one gay accent because the queer community is not a monolith. Second, the gay male lisp is not actually a lisp, which would involve misarticulating their S's. They actually overpronounce their S's along with many other consonants. Third, it's not just an imitation of women's speech, which I've heard many people say. Phonetic research shows that many gay men lower what we call the trap and dress vowels, or the A and S sounds in this region of the mouth. Gay men also tend to speak in a breathier voice and have a wider pitch range, but what's really interesting to me is why they speak this way, because it comes out of their history as a marginalized community. The gay accent fundamentally functions as metalinguistic signaling, as a way for queer people to find each other when it might not be socially acceptable to be open about it. For example, in 19th century England, gay circus performers needed a way to hide from undercover policemen, so they developed an entire slang system called Polari to secretly signal to each other. Same thing happened in the Philippines, where gay men developed a slang dialect called Swordspeak, which involves a special kind of code switching between English and Tagalog. And if you really look, some kind of gay accent has emerged in every country and culture, which is linguistically very cool, but socially kind of sad that it's always necessary.
Okay, so yeah, that was a bit of background on what the gay accent is and what those speech sounds look like in gay men. But now, kind of, what does this? Why does this matter? Or essentially, what is the connection between that and then what I'm actually looking into for my project? Um, so a few things. First of all, the connection between Dr. Walmark's study and the concepts of vocal fry and uptalk and how they are often associated with femininity and female sexuality. And these associations, especially not only in women, like as Dr. Walmark um, explored, but also in men, if we hear that kind of speech pattern in men, this becomes a sort of mechanism to identify and outcast the others who don't speak in the normative way. So speaking in a more like um, stereotypically um, feminine or ditzy kind of way is perceived like that. And yeah, speakers of uptalk or vocal fry are more often discriminated against or deemed less educated and less hireable. This was particularly about women who speak in this way, but oftentimes gay men can be perceived speaking this type of way too. So um, I feel like that kind of aligns with a lot of the ways that gay men are also kind of perceived. Um, and then, yeah, just kind of this concept as well with sociophonetics and how it informs our understanding of the way our language production intersects with our social identity. Um, and just a lot about like how, excuse me, a lot about how like the way that we produce our vowels and like our pitch variety and things like that are actually heavily indicative of our social identity and can allow us to it can be positive or negative. It can allow us to navigate certain like communities, such as with the Polari and other language varieties, and as it was talked about in the Pratt study about Californian college students. But this can also be um, potentially harmful as well when we associate certain um, language production with an identity and then attributing these certain features to like just a pitch, like a higher pitch just equals femininity for whatever reason. So, um, all that to say, my central question for this is if there is such a prominent and historically rooted gay accent, which the gay community has used to identify each other and find that community, do lesbians have a similar accent? And if so, why isn't it as recognizable or talked about? So, is there a lesbian accent? Like I just said, the gay accent is very recognizable, and there is much discussion and discourse on the ways that gay men speak, but far less like societally about the ways lesbian women speak. We don't have as often people attributing like certain speech patterns to women and going like, "Oh, you must be a lesbian because you're talking like that," as much as we do with gay men. So, also there seems to be less of a historical significance with language variations such as Polari, that may unify one clear lesbian accent in the way that we do with the gay accent, or multiple variations of the gay voice that kind of led to what we have today as the gay accent. But yeah, so however, studies have shown that there does seem to be consistent pitch and vowel variation in lesbian women compared to heterosexual women. Lesbian women generally have lower average pitch and less pitch variation than heterosexual women, and lesbians may also produce some vowels farther back in their mouths than other women. So, this indicates to me that a lesbian accent of sorts most definitely exists, but it is less recognizable and less talked about in larger discussions of language and sexuality because the gay accent is more distinguishable. And then again, just as the gay accent is associated with a higher pitch and therefore femininity, the lesbian accent is most often associated with the lower pitch and therefore masculinity. So once again, I have a little TikTok to show that really nicely condenses and summarizes all this information regarding the lesbian accent.
Has anyone else noticed there's a very obvious gay accent, but not a super distinct lesbian accent? Well, that's actually not entirely true. There are studies showing that lesbian women tend to restrict their pitch range more and push some vowels further back in their mouth. However, outside listeners are unable to tell that someone is lesbian just by hearing her talk, even though they can really consistently tell that someone is gay just by listening to their voice. So it's not really true that there isn't a lesbian accent, it's just that we are way worse at identifying it. And the reason that's true is because society considers masculinity to be the default. Because the gay accent is traditionally perceived as feminine, and if anything, the lesbian accent would be perceived as more masculine, we tend to notice the gay accent more because it deviates more from the default we expect to hear. It's the exact same reason why a man wearing stereotypically female clothes is going to stand out way more than a woman wearing stereotypically male clothes. Masculinity is the default, so female gender inversion is inherently less surprising to us. Has anyone else noticed there's a very obvious gay act?
Okay. Um, yeah, so All of that to say, kind of the larger connection to language and power and what this actually means, why it's important. First of all, as we saw in Dr. Weisler's study, about how we have these cognitive associations with certain sociolinguistic cues or yeah, those sociolinguistic connections that we make in our heads of just like, for example, um, we can I would say I would draw the connection from Dr. Weisler's study to a larger idea of linguistic discrimination in the gay community as well. Um, for example, with like the feminine uptalk or higher pitch range in men, like equals the gay voice, and so we just perceive it that way, and that can lead to stereotypical perceptions and linguistic discrimination, perceiving certain men as gay or perhaps less than, or lead to homophobic treatments of these people just for talking with a higher pitch or something like that. Um, and yeah, so gay men often face linguistic discrimination for this gay accent, but lesbian women don't receive as much linguistic discrimination because there is less of that cognitive association between like, oh, lesbian woman or sorry, lower pitch equals lesbian woman equals, stereotypical perception in someone's head. I think there is less of that cognitive association happening for lesbians than there is for the gay accent. Um, so yeah, this speaks to how there's a difference in the way that gay men versus lesbian women are treated. Um, and then also, not only that, but lesbians may also have less of an easily recognizable way to identify each other and find community. So maybe lesbians don't experience as much linguistic discrimination or harm from the way that we talk, but it might be harder to navigate linguistically. Like you might just like, hear someone using the gay accent, and then you can easily understand that that person is part of your community, but it might be a little bit harder to navigate the lesbian community. Or we come up with other ways to do it with signaling and other meaningful ways to understand that we are in community with each other, which I believe that we do. And then the one last point, which in that last TikTok was kind of like the driving point to this, but this this really is reflective of the larger ideas, I guess, in society of how masculinity is assumed to be the norm or the default. And so when men deviate from that norm and are perceived to be feminine with the higher pitch or the uptalk, they are there's more cause for discourse with that. They are more easily seen as deviating from the norm. But if women are um, perceived as a little bit more masculine than usual, and they're deviating from that femininity, then there seems to be less cause for concern, less cause for discourse, because at the end of the day, masculinity is perceived as the default. Um, and so yeah, there is less recognition in a lesbian accent because we really just don't talk about it as much, or we don't see a societally we don't see a reason for concern when women act more masculine, but when men act feminine, is that's when we feel the need to um, control and uh, enact power on those people. So yeah, I think that is my main discussion. And thank you for listening. Um, yeah.